I'm your host, Oz Dalton, and welcome to American Scandal Report, a place where we peel back the glamorous veneer of Hollywood's most prestigious night to reveal the scandals, controversies, and uncomfortable truths that the Academy would rather you forget. Today, we're diving deep into the dark side of Oscar history, a world where politics, prejudice, and profit collide in the most spectacular ways. Picture this. Millions of viewers tune in every year to watch beautiful people in expensive gowns and tuxedos celebrate the art of filmmaking. But what you don't see are the backroom deals, the systematic exclusions, the political battles, and the moral compromises that have shaped Oscar history for decades. Today, we're going behind that golden curtain to explore the controversies that have rocked the Academy Awards and why they matter more than you might think. If you crave the hidden truths behind Hollywood's glitziest night, don't stop here. Discover more untold stories, revealing cultural histories and exclusive investigations with Skoob, the AI powered podcast app featuring over 1,500 expertly curated episodes inspired by the industry's most explosive exposés. From red carpet revelations to power struggles that changed entertainment forever, Skoob delivers the insights the studios hope you'll overlook. Download Skoob now from the App Store or Play Store and keep discovering the stories behind the spotlight. Let's get started because sometimes the biggest drama isn't on the screen. Before we dive into specific scandals, let's talk about what the Oscars really represent. Because here's the thing that might shock you. The Academy Awards aren't just about celebrating great cinema. They're about something much more primal. Competition, money, and power. In our society, we're obsessed with competition. We live for the Super Bowl, we binge watch American Idol, and we love nothing more than watching people succeed or fail spectacularly. The Oscars feed directly into this obsession. It's the ultimate reality show where we get to watch the rich and famous get divided into the most brutal categories possible, winners and losers. Think about it. When those cameras pan across the audience during the ceremony, what are we really looking for? We want to see the disappointment that nominees try so hard to conceal when someone else's name gets called. We want to catch that split second when their carefully constructed facade cracks, revealing the very human emotions underneath all that Hollywood polish. But here's where it gets really interesting and really dark. The Oscars have become a mirror reflecting Hollywood's most ruthless tendencies. Back in the 1980s, when the blockbuster mentality took over major studios after Star Wars, the Academy Awards served as a kind of moral safety valve. Studios could point to their support for smaller artistic films and say, see, it's not all about the money. Except it was about the money. And it didn't take long for an industry built on the ruthless pursuit of profit to adapt those same tactics to the ruthless pursuit of gold statuettes. Over the past few decades, Oscar campaigns have become exercises in pure strategic warfare, complete with late releases, targeted screenings, celebrity endorsements, talk show appearances, and yes, underhanded tactics that would make a political operative blush. The Academy knows this is a problem. They're painfully aware that their prestige depends on the perception that Oscars are awarded for genuine merit, not marketing muscle. When Halle Berry cried after winning Best Actress in 2002, it was supposed to be because 6,000 voters recognized her talent, not because her studio had the most effective campaign strategy. But despite decades of tweaking regulations and punishing violations, even the Academy can't deny that their annual celebration has become thoroughly infected by the commercial fever of modern Hollywood. The Oscar statuettes have become the most coveted prizes for companies determined to amass both money and awards, and the show itself has become irresistible television precisely because the competition and the questions about intentions are so visible. This is the context we need to understand as we explore the specific controversies that have defined Oscar history. Because every scandal, every protest, every awkward moment we're about to discuss happened within this larger system, a system where art and commerce, politics and entertainment are hopelessly intertwined. Let's travel back to 1979 when the Academy made a decision that seemed perfectly reasonable at the time, but would spark years of controversy. After decades of movie star hosts, they decided to try something different. Johnny Carson, the undisputed king of late night television. At 52, Carson brought a relaxed, conversational style that had charmed TV audiences for over 15 years. The Academy thought they'd found the perfect balance. Someone with enough charm to match previous hosts like Bob Hope, but without the edge that made them nervous about more controversial figures like Richard Pryor. What they didn't count on was Carson's incorrigible tendency to mock the very institution he was supposed to be celebrating. Carson's approach to hosting was like watching a beloved uncle who couldn't help but point out everyone's embarrassing family secrets. When technical award winners didn't show up, which happened frequently because, let's be honest, who gets excited about sound effects editing? Carson couldn't resist making jokes. In 1980, when the winner of the Sound Effects Editing Award for The Black Stallion was a no-show, Carson immediately compared it to previous boycotts by heavyweights, like George C. Scott and Marlon Brando. Now, this might seem like harmless comedy to us, but remember, the Academy takes itself very seriously. Many members were genuinely offended by Carson's suggestion that technical categories were somehow less important, or that winners skipping the ceremony was becoming a trend worth mocking. But Carson's real controversy came with something called Oscars Only Human, a musical medley that highlighted great movie songs that had failed to secure Academy Award nominations. On the surface, this sounds like harmless entertainment, maybe even a tribute to overlooked artistry. But the music branch of the Academy saw it as a direct attack, and they had reason to be sensitive. By 1979, the music branch was already under intense scrutiny for some genuinely baffling oversights. They had failed to nominate Diana Ross's Theme from Mahogany, which was not just popular, but critically acclaimed. Even more embarrassingly, they had completely ignored the entire Saturday Night Fever soundtrack by the Bee Gees, an album that had dominated the charts and cultural conversation. So when the music branch heard about Carson's planned medley celebrating their failures, they essentially declared war. The protest reached the highest levels of Academy politics, creating a standoff with producer Jack Haley Jr. that threatened to derail the entire show. Haley stood his ground, the medley aired, and it was actually well received by audiences, but the damage was done. Carson had established a precedent that the Oscars could be a platform for critiquing the very institution presenting them, and not everyone was comfortable with that level of self-awareness. Despite the controversies, Carson's tenure from 1979 to 1984 brought something the Academy desperately needed: stability. During these years, Academy membership grew to around 5,000, and the Oscar show began its inexorable expansion toward the 3.5-hour marathon we know today. The Carson years also featured some genuinely historic moments. In 1981, the ceremony was postponed following the assassination attempt on President Ronald Reagan, a reminder that even Hollywood's biggest night couldn't escape the broader political turmoil of the era. And in 1983, Polish director Zbigniew Rybczynski was arrested after a disagreement with a security guard, creating an international incident that highlighted the tensions between artistic recognition and practical logistics. When Carson finally stepped down, the Academy discovered something that would haunt them for decades. Finding a host who could balance entertainment with reverence, humor with respect, was much harder than they'd imagined. The immediate aftermath was telling. Jack Lemmon tried a shorter, more serious approach in 1985. The following year brought a mismatched trio of Robin Williams, Jane Fonda, and Alan Alda that satisfied no one. By 1987, producer Samuel Goldwyn Jr. faced a harsh reality. Hosting the Oscars was no longer seen as a prestigious gig. A parade of high-profile celebrities turned down the opportunity, and the Academy ended up with the less-than-stellar trio of Telly Savalas, Pat Morita, and Dom DeLuise. Carson had opened a door that couldn't be closed. The idea that the Oscars could be a site of controversy, critique, and uncomfortable truths was now embedded in the show's DNA. And as we'll see, that was just the beginning. Fast forward to the 1990s, and we encounter one of the most damning exposés of Academy bias ever documented. This story comes to us through the eyes of Landon Jones, the American editor who became editor of People magazine and found himself with a front row seat to Hollywood's most uncomfortable truths. Jones attended an Oscar ceremony expecting to witness a celebration of cinematic achievement. Instead, he discovered a masterclass in institutional racism that was both subtle and devastating in its implications. As Jones waited for the ceremony to begin, he noticed something that seemed obvious once he started paying attention. The audience was exclusively white. Not predominantly white, not mostly white, exclusively white. Thousands of people in their finest attire, representing the pinnacle of American entertainment, and not a single person of color among the invited guests. But that wasn't the most shocking part. Jones observed a group of elegantly dressed individuals standing in the outer aisles, clearly waiting for something. These were the seat fillers, people assigned to occupy any empty seats if Oscar recipients left their places, ensuring that the television cameras would always show a full house. Here's what's truly remarkable about this system. Hollywood had created a mechanism that could have easily introduced visual diversity into their broadcast. They could have ensured that the camera shots included people of color, creating at least the appearance of inclusion. Instead, these seat fillers were also entirely white. Friends and relatives of influential Academy members and ABC television executives. Think about the deliberate nature of this choice. It wasn't an oversight or an accident. It was a conscious decision to maintain racial homogeneity even in roles that were essentially cosmetic. As Jones noted with bitter irony, even when Hollywood could have faked diversity, they chose not to. This wasn't new behavior for the Academy. The pattern of exclusion stretched back decades, often accompanied by explicit intimidation and persecution. When Hattie McDaniel was nominated for her role in Gone with the Wind, she was barred from staying at the Ambassador Hotel and couldn't join her castmates at the Coconut Grove Ballroom. She was nominated for an Academy Award but couldn't sit with her colleagues. Paul Robeson, one of the most talented performers of his generation, was trailed by the FBI for expressing political opinions. Sidney Poitier was coerced by the House Un-American Activities Committee to sign a loyalty oath disavowing Robeson and actor-activist Canada Lee before he could appear in Blackboard Jungle. Eartha Kitt faced social exile for criticizing the Vietnam War at President Johnson's White House. This pattern had a name, Speaking Out While Black. The idea that black performers could achieve limited success as long as they remained silent about social and political issues. But the problem went far deeper than individual cases of discrimination. People magazine's investigation revealed the scope of systemic exclusion in stunning detail. Among the 166 nominees for the 1996 Academy Awards, only one was black. Nominated for a live-action short film, essentially the least visible category possible. The numbers were even more devastating when you looked at industry organizations. Less than 200 out of the Academy's 5,043 members were black, just 3.9%. The Directors Guild of America was 2.3% black. The Writers Guild of America was 2.6% black. Stagehand unions were 2% black. Here's what makes these numbers truly shocking. Black Americans constituted 13% of the total population and 25% of cinema goers. The people buying movie tickets, supporting the industry, and creating the profits that funded everything Hollywood did were being systematically excluded from the industry itself. Hollywood was failing to tell their stories, failing to provide them with pathways to stardom, and failing to recognize their contributions when they managed to break through despite the barriers. People magazine's cover story was titled Hollywood Blackout, and the industry's reaction was exactly what you'd expect: denial, deflection, and anger. The story was not well received by an industry that preferred to see itself as progressive and inclusive. It would take 2 more decades before the Upwish Oscars' So White protests emerged in 2016, forcing a conversation that Hollywood had been avoiding for generations. And even then, the industry's initial response was to downplay and dismiss the concerns rather than engage with the systemic problems that had been documented since at least the 1990s. This wasn't just about the Oscars. It was about an entire industry structure that had been designed to exclude and that continued to exclude even when faced with undeniable evidence of its bias. If you want to understand how the Academy's internal politics can override artistic merit, look no further than the 1995 documentary category and one of the most egregious snubs in Oscar history. Hoop Dreams was not your typical documentary. Directed by Steve James, this 3-hour film followed 2 high school basketball hopefuls from Chicago's inner city as they pursued their dreams of joining the NBA. The film received mainstream recognition that was virtually unprecedented for a documentary. Fine Line Features was so confident in its quality that they campaigned for a Best Picture nomination, something that was almost unthinkable for a documentary at the time. The film was brilliant, moving, and culturally significant. It seemed like a lock for the Best Documentary Feature category, where most observers assumed it had a strong chance of winning. Instead, it wasn't even nominated. To understand how this happened, you need to understand the Byzantine process, the Academy used for documentary nominations. Unlike other categories that were voted on by relevant branch members, documentaries were selected by a special committee. This committee consisted of volunteers from all 13 branches of the Academy, meaning that people with no particular expertise in documentaries were making decisions about documentary excellence. The demographic composition of this committee was telling. Mostly retired or elderly Academy members who had to be available every Tuesday and Thursday night for 3 months to review 63 films vying for nominations. This wasn't exactly a group position to appreciate innovative filmmaking. The committee's voting system was designed for efficiency rather than careful consideration. 15 minutes into each documentary, they would vote with flashing lights. If 3/4 of the members turned on their lights, the film would be stopped immediately. They'd vote again every 10 minutes, and stopping the film required only a simple majority. Think about what this system incentivized. Committee members who didn't want to spend their entire evening watching a 3-hour documentary about inner city basketball could simply vote to stop it early. There was no requirement to watch films in their entirety, no obligation to consider artistic merit over personal convenience. Committee member Chuck Workman later admitted that many members' experience was limited to older films or PBS documentaries. They were missing the wave of innovative non-fiction filmmaking that had emerged since the late 80s, exactly the kind of work that Hoop Dreams represented. The failure to nominate Hoop Dreams created an outcry that surpassed previous documentary snubs. Even high-profile ones like Woodstock, The Thin Blue Line, and Roger and Me. Critics were particularly outraged when one of the nominations went to Maya Lin, A Strong Clear Vision, which had received lukewarm reviews but was directed by Frida Lee Mock, a previous chairwoman of the documentary committee. The appearance of insider favoritism was impossible to ignore. Here was a film that had received widespread critical acclaim being passed over for one directed by someone with clear connections to the selection process. Academy President Arthur Hiller promised to review the documentary committee's procedures, and Bruce Davis took the unprecedented step of requesting complete voting results from Price Waterhouse, the accounting firm that tallied the votes. What they discovered was devastating. A small group of committee members had given 0 scores to all films except the 5 they wanted nominated, and perfect 10s to those 5 films. This strategic voting skewed the results, allowing a coordinated minority to override the preferences of the majority. The Hoop Dreams controversy exposed how the Academy's internal processes could be manipulated by personal relationships, political considerations, and simple bias. It wasn't just about one documentary being overlooked. It was about a system that allowed excellence to be undermined by politics and convenience. This scandal forced the Academy to confront an uncomfortable truth. Their supposedly merit-based selection process was vulnerable to manipulation and bias. The changes they implemented afterward were significant, but the damage to their credibility was lasting. The Hoop Dreams snub became a symbol of how institutional bias could masquerade as artistic judgment, and how even well-intentioned processes could produce deeply unfair results when they weren't designed with genuine equity in mind. To understand one of the most divisive moments in Oscar history, we need to travel back to the darkest period in Hollywood's relationship with politics, the Blacklist era of the 1940s and 1950s. October 27, 1997, marked the 50th anniversary of the Hollywood 10 hearings, and the 4 major entertainment guilds sponsored a tribute called Hollywood Remembers the Blacklist. This wasn't just a historical remembrance. It was a statement that the entertainment industry was finally ready to confront its complicity in one of the most shameful chapters in American history. The tribute was powerful and emotional. Billy Crystal recited poignant lines from Larry Parks' testimony before the House Un-American Activities Committee. John Lithgow read from Sterling Hayden's testimony. Kevin Spacey impersonated Paul Jarrico, a blacklisted screenwriter whose career was destroyed by political persecution. Perhaps most movingly, Alfre Woodard read a fierce letter written by blacklisted actress Anne Revere in 1953, demanding that the Screen Actors Guild abolish the loyalty oath imposed on all members. That oath remained a requirement until 1967, when members of the Grateful Dead refused to sign it, finally forcing the Guild to abandon this relic of McCarthyism. Richard Masur, president of the Screen Actors Guild, expressed regret over the Guild's inaction during the Blacklist era, admitting that fear had paralyzed the organization. Leaders of the Directors Guild, the Writers Guild of America, and the American Federation of Radio and Television Artists echoed these sentiments. By the late 1990s, there was a genuine effort to make amends. The Writers Guild had taken steps to restore screen credits for blacklisted writers, correcting the historical record for 82 films by 2000, with over 100 others under review. But not all wounds had healed, and the Academy was about to discover just how deep some of those wounds remained. In March 1999, director Elia Kazan received an honorary Oscar, and the response was explosive. Inside the ceremony, some Academy members refused to applaud, a stunning breach of Oscar protocol that spoke to the depth of feeling this honor provoked. Outside the venue, 250 demonstrators protested, including blacklisted screenwriters Bernard Gordon and Robert Lees, men whose careers had been destroyed by the very system that Kazan had supported. A full-page ad in Daily Variety denounced Kazan for testifying against his former colleagues 47 years earlier. The message was clear: some betrayals don't heal with time. Kazan's case was complicated because he was genuinely one of America's greatest directors. His films, On the Waterfront, A Streetcar Named Desire, and East of Eden were masterpieces that had shaped American cinema. But he was also someone who had named names before the House Un-American Activities Committee, providing information that destroyed the careers of former friends and colleagues. The Oscar controversy reflected a deeper question about art and morality. Could artistic excellence excuse political betrayal? Should the Academy honor great work regardless of the personal conduct of the artist? These questions had no easy answers, and the divided response to Kazan's honorary Oscar reflected the ongoing struggle to balance artistic recognition with moral judgment. The Blacklist era had changed American cinema in profound ways. Dorothy B. Jones's 1956 study for the Fund for the Republic revealed that the number of Hollywood films with social themes had drastically declined after the first HUAC hearings in 1947. The 1950s and early 1960s saw filmmakers avoiding social issues and focusing instead on safer cultural and psychological themes. It wasn't until the 1960s that blacklisted writers and directors like Ring Lardner Jr., Waldo Salt, Abe Polonsky, Martin Ritt, Dalton Trumbo, and Walter Bernstein returned to the industry, paving the way for a new generation of socially conscious filmmakers like Warren Beatty, Hal Ashby, Norman Jewison, and Francis Ford Coppola. The controversy over Kazan's honorary Oscar demonstrated that the Blacklist era wasn't just historical tragedy. It was living memory for many in the industry. The wounds hadn't healed, the divisions hadn't been resolved, and the Academy found itself in the impossible position of trying to honor artistic achievement while navigating the moral complexities of political persecution. In 2012, The Hollywood Reporter published a detailed account of its own role in stirring up the Red Scare and Blacklist, including an apology from W.R. Wilkerson III, son of Billy Wilkerson. He admitted that his father had been motivated more by revenge against studio heads who had snubbed him than by genuine anti-communist beliefs, and confessed that the Blacklist had silenced and ruined the careers of some of Hollywood's greatest talents. But by then, the damage was done. The Kazan controversy had shown that the Academy couldn't escape the political implications of its choices, and that honoring artistic achievement would always be complicated by questions of personal conduct and political history. Sometimes the most devastating Oscar controversies are the ones that never quite happen, the campaigns that implode, the frontrunners that collapse, the sure things that disappear overnight. The story of Nate Parker and The Birth of a Nation is one of those tragedies, where past actions destroyed future possibilities in the most public way imaginable. In the summer of 2016, Fox Searchlight was gearing up for what they expected to be one of the year's biggest Oscar campaigns. The Birth of a Nation, Parker's directorial debut about Nat Turner's slave rebellion, had everything going for it. The film had won the Audience Award and Grand Jury Prize at Sundance, setting off a fierce bidding war that Fox won for $17.5 million, a record for the festival. The promotional campaign was sophisticated and powerful. Posters showed Parker against an American flag fashioned into a noose. Cardboard cutouts depicting rioting slaves appeared in theaters, standing out dramatically against the usual superhero fare. This was clearly intended to be more than entertainment. It was a political statement, Perfectly timed for the final months of the Obama presidency and the aggressive rise of Donald Trump in the Republican primaries, everything pointed to Oscar gold. The film tackled important historical subject matter, featured powerful performances, and addressed racial justice issues that were increasingly prominent in national conversations. Parker himself was being positioned as a major new voice in American cinema. Then August arrived and everything changed. A story from Parker's past resurfaced, one that had been public knowledge but had somehow been overlooked in the excitement of Sundance and the focus on award potential. In 1999, when Parker was a 19-year-old student at Penn State, he and his roommate Jean Celestin were accused of raping a freshman girl following a night of drinking. Celestin, who was also Parker's wrestling teammate and co-writer for The Birth of a Nation, was found guilty and sentenced to 6 months in prison, though this was later overturned on appeal. Parker was acquitted, but the accuser alleged that the university had protected the athletes and that Parker and his friends had circulated her photo around campus to be defaced, a detail that spoke to a pattern of intimidation and humiliation. The timing couldn't have been worse for Parker's Oscar campaign. This wasn't ancient history being dredged up by political opponents. It was a serious allegation about sexual assault surfacing just as the entertainment industry was beginning to grapple with its own problems regarding the treatment of women. Parker tried to address the controversy directly, describing the incident as a very painful moment in my life and emphasizing that he had been legally absolved of all wrongdoing. But legal absolution and public perception are two very different things, especially when it comes to allegations of sexual assault. Then came a revelation that turned controversy into tragedy. The accuser's brother revealed that she had committed suicide in 2012 after battling severe depression, drug addiction, and delusions. Parker expressed profound sorrow upon learning of her death and admitted that he may have lacked empathy while trying to clear his name in the years following the accusations. The impact on the Oscar campaign was catastrophic. What had once seemed like a clear path to awards recognition became a fierce debate over race, gender, and the intersection of personal conduct with artistic achievement. Roxane Gay, writing for the New York Times, captured the complexity perfectly. I cannot separate the art and the artist. The controversy highlighted uncomfortable questions that the industry was reluctant to address. How should past allegations affect present recognition? What weight should legal outcomes carry in moral judgments? How could the Academy balance supporting important stories about racial justice with concerns about celebrating someone accused of sexual assault? The Birth of a Nation quickly lost its luster. Scenes of sexual violence in the film, which were not based on historical facts, but were Parker's creative additions, suddenly appeared distasteful and exploitative in light of the controversy. The film's reputation was irreparably damaged even before its wide release. The once likely Best Picture frontrunner faded from contention, making way for La La Land to step into the spotlight. Parker's directorial career never recovered. The film that was supposed to establish him as a major filmmaker instead became a cautionary tale about how the past can destroy the future. The Birth of a Nation controversy was particularly painful because it involved a film that told an important story about American history and racial injustice. The collapse of Parker's campaign meant that these stories received less attention and recognition, creating a complex situation where legitimate concerns about sexual assault allegations potentially undermined important conversations about racial justice. This case perfectly illustrated how Oscar controversies in the modern era could be about much more than just movies. They could become flashpoints for broader cultural debates about justice, accountability, and the relationship between personal conduct and professional achievement. The Academy found itself in the impossible position of trying to navigate these issues, while maintaining the appearance of being above politics and focused solely on artistic merit. The Nate Parker tragedy showed that in the social media age, Oscar campaigns could be destroyed not just by bad reviews or poor box office performance, but by the moral complexities of the real world intruding on the carefully constructed narratives of award season. The 2017 Oscar ceremony took place just days after Donald Trump's inauguration, and the tension was palpable from the moment nominations were announced. This wasn't just another awards show, it was a cultural battlefield where Hollywood's vision of America would clash directly with the new president's agenda. The conflict began even before the ceremony. Meryl Streep's Golden Globe speech had already drawn a sharp line in the sand when she criticized Trump without naming him, focusing instead on an incident where he appeared to mock a disabled reporter. Trump's predictable response, calling Streep overrated on Twitter, signaled that the traditional separation between entertainment and politics was officially dead. Streep's speech represented a significant shift in Hollywood's approach to political engagement. After 2 months of hesitation and uncertainty about how to respond to Trump's election, one of the few film stars with sufficient stature to risk alienating half the country had unequivocally chosen a side. The message was clear: this wasn't going to be a politics as usual award season. When the Oscar nominations were announced 4 days after Trump's inauguration, they told a very different story about America than the one the new president was promoting. While Trump spoke grimly of American carnage in his inaugural address, Academy President Cheryl Boone Isaacs arrived at the Academy building to smiling faces and genuine relief. For the first time in 3 years, there wouldn't be a not black Oscars so white controversy. There were nominees of color in all 4 acting categories: Mahershala Ali and Naomi Harris for Moonlight, Denzel Washington and Viola Davis for Fences, and Dev Patel for Lion. The absence of nominations for The Birth of a Nation had paved the way for less ostentatious but equally powerful films about Black lives, including Moonlight, Fences, Loving, and Hidden Figures. La La Land tied the record with 14 nominations, matching All About Eve and Titanic. Moonlight and Arrival both received 8 nominations, while Manchester by the Sea earned Amazon Studios its first Best Picture nomination. The diversity of stories and perspectives seemed to offer a direct counter-narrative to Trump's vision of American greatness. But the nominations also included a Best Directing nomination for Mel Gibson, indicating the Academy's willingness to forgive past transgressions, a complexity that would become increasingly relevant as the industry grappled with questions of accountability and redemption. 3 days after the nominations, Trump signed an executive order temporarily banning entry to the US from 7 predominantly Muslim countries and indefinitely blocking Syrian refugees. The ban had immediate impact on the award season when Asghar Farhadi, the Iranian director of The Salesman, declared that he would not attend the ceremony in protest. Farhadi's absence became a powerful symbol of how Trump's policies were affecting the international film community. Here was an acclaimed director, nominated for the highest honor in his category, who felt compelled to boycott the ceremony because of American immigration policy. The political tension reached a crescendo at the SAG Awards, which were filled with defiant speeches. John Legend, the only black lead in La La Land, spoke of Los Angeles as the home of so many immigrants and declared, "Our vision of America is directly antithetical to that of President Trump." Mahershala Ali's speech stood out for its eloquence and power, speaking to the experience of Muslim Americans in the Trump era. However, not everyone approached the situation with appropriate gravity. Harvey Weinstein, ever the opportunist, saw a chance to exploit the political moment and ran an ad featuring 8-year-old actor Sonny Power's face with a politically charged message about immigration. The ad perfectly illustrated the dangers of mixing legitimate political concerns with awards season campaigning. As the ceremony approached, the Los Angeles Times' Glenn Lovell predicted that the Oscars would be a referendum on Trump. Critics began questioning what some called the unbearable whiteness of La La Land, with its white jazz savior protagonist seeming increasingly problematic in the charged political atmosphere. The teams behind Moonlight and La La Land, who had become friendly over shared award season meals, found themselves astonished to be dragged into a broader political debate. What had started as artistic competition was now being framed as a choice between different visions of American identity. Despite late season success at the Producers Guild, Directors Guild, and BAFTA Awards, La La Land was beginning to show signs of fatigue. The film's nostalgic vision of Hollywood seemed increasingly tone-deaf, in a moment demanding urgent political engagement. Critics like Justin Chang of the LA Times passionately argued that Moonlight deserves to win the Oscar for Best Picture, not simply because it would be the most politically resonant choice, but because it navigated the complex intersection of artistry and representation with unprecedented skill. The 2017 Oscars ultimately became a defining moment for Hollywood's relationship with political power. The industry that had often tried to stay above partisan politics found itself forced to choose sides, and the choice they made, symbolized by Moonlight's Best Picture win, established a new paradigm for how entertainment and politics would intersect in the Trump era and beyond. As we reach the end of our journey through Oscar history's most controversial moments, what becomes clear is that these scandals weren't aberrations or unfortunate accidents. They were inevitable products of a system that sits at the intersection of art, commerce, politics, and ego. The Academy Awards have always been more than just a celebration of cinematic achievement. They've been a mirror reflecting American society's deepest tensions around race, politics, power, and money. Every controversy we've explored, from Johnny Carson's irreverent comedy to the Trump era's political battles, reveals something essential about how our culture processes difference, handles accountability, and negotiates the relationship between artistic merit and moral judgment. What's fascinating is how these controversies have evolved over time. In the Carson era, the biggest concern was whether it was appropriate to make jokes about the Academy's own processes. By the 1990s, we were confronting systematic racial exclusion. In the 2000s, we were grappling with historical injustices and questions of forgiveness. And by 2017, we were witnessing a full-scale culture war playing out on Hollywood's biggest stage. Each era's controversies reflected that moment's particular anxieties and blind spots, but they also revealed constants that remain relevant today. The tension between artistic excellence and personal conduct, the challenge of creating genuinely inclusive institutions, and the impossibility of separating entertainment from the broader political and social currents of American life. Perhaps most importantly, these controversies show us that the Oscar ceremony's power extends far beyond simply recognizing good movies. The choices the Academy makes, whom they nominate, whom they honor, whom they exclude, send messages about whose stories matter, whose achievements deserve recognition, and what kind of society we want to be. The Academy has learned from many of these controversies. Membership has been diversified, voting processes have been reformed, and there's greater awareness of how systemic biases can masquerade as artistic judgment. But new challenges continue to emerge, because the fundamental tensions that create Oscar controversies haven't disappeared. We still live in a society where art and commerce compete for primacy, where questions of representation and inclusion remain contentious, and where the personal conduct of artists complicates our appreciation of their work. The Academy Awards will continue to be controversial because they will continue to reflect these unresolved tensions in American culture. But maybe that's not entirely a bad thing. These controversies force conversations that might not happen otherwise. They compel an industry to confront its own biases and blind spots. They create moments when the entertainment world has to articulate its values and defend its choices. The golden statuettes may be symbols of artistic achievement, but the controversies surrounding them reveal something equally valuable: the ongoing struggle to create institutions that balance excellence with equity, tradition with progress, and artistic recognition with moral accountability. As long as the Oscars remain culturally significant, they will remain controversial, and as long as they remain controversial, they will continue to serve as a fascinating window into who we are as a society, what we value, and how we navigate the complex relationship between art and life in America. The curtain may fall on each year's ceremony, but the conversations these controversies generate continue long after the last speech is given and the last award is presented. In the end, perhaps that's the most important function the Oscar controversies serve. Not just entertaining us with Hollywood drama, but forcing us to think more deeply about the values and biases that shape our cultural institutions. Behind that golden curtain, the show goes on, and so do the controversies that make it worth watching. Thanks for joining me for this deep dive into Oscar controversy history with yours truly, Oz Dalton. This has been yet another explosive from American Scandal Report. And if you enjoyed this exploration of Hollywood's hidden stories, please subscribe and share with anyone who loves movies, drama, or just a good behind-the-scenes scandal. For even more revealing dives into pop culture, film industry secrets, and the larger-than-life characters who shape the movies we love, don't miss out on Skoob, the AI-powered podcast app with over 1,500 expertly curated episodes inspired by Hollywood exposés and exclusive investigations. Download Skoob now from the App Store or Play Store and keep uncovering the real drama, one story at a time. And remember, in Hollywood, the real drama always happens off camera.